Welcome to Secur IT, the podcast where we explore the people, the policies, and technologies shaping the future of cybersecurity. I am your host, Philip de Souza, and itching to go with some great guests today and some amazing content. Today, we're diving into one of the most pressing issues facing organizations everywhere, the intersection of AI, policy, and governance. How do boards, executives, innovators keep up with the speed of technology, the risk of AI, and the evolving role of cybersecurity as a business issue, not just a technical one? That's going to be the question for our guests. To unpack that, I am joined by two truly remarkable women who bring unique perspectives to the table. First, Tamara Gracon, founder and CEO of TBG Consulting, a leader in governance, strategic change, and board development. She's also a champion for women's leadership and diversity in the boardroom, cognitive diversity, cognitive dissonance and cognitive diversity. I was getting confused with that. It's a lot to memorize. And Tamara is joined by Jenny Kay Pollock, founder of Women in AI, a community driving diversity and innovation in artificial intelligence. I believe Jenny's also on the board of How Women Lead.
Yep.
She's a technologist, speaker, and advocate for responsible, inclusive AI. Tamara, Jenny, welcome to Secur IT.
Thanks. We're delighted to be here. So excited to be in conversation with you today, Philip.
Awesome. And for those just listening, that was Tamara first and Jenny following. Consider that a sound check. So for our listeners, we're going to start on the personal lens and then dive into your specialties and then do a little collaborative. So let's start with a bit of your journey, ladies. You've both built fascinating careers at the crossroads of technology and leadership. What pulled you into this world? And Tamara, we'll start with you first. Was there a defining moment that made cybersecurity or AI governance personal to you?
Yeah, I built much of my career at KPMG here in Silicon Valley as a transfer pricing economist. And so I spent the bulk of my career valuing technology and helping restructure supply chains for corporate tax goals. But in doing so, had the opportunity to interview chief technologists from an array of firms and really got deeply curious about technology and what makes it valuable to an enterprise as a whole. And that curiosity has sort of been the hallmark of my career, and AI is simply the newest forefront in that journey.
Transfer pricing technologist. Oh my gosh, those are fighting words. So I can relate my degrees. One of my degrees is in cost accounting. And it gets down to the nitty gritty. Only in the early days, it was the start of my wife Bernadine's career at Mattel. She'd come home grinning, and there I was, buried by sheets of cost accounting paper, prompted me to leave and start my career. Jenny, over to you. Same question. And I'd love to know, what did you learn from those experiences and those milestones that still shape your perspective today?
Great question. So I moved to Silicon Valley about a decade ago. I was working in the middle of Wisconsin, and I was doing this really boring sales job right out of college. And with that, I was reading a lot of books as I drive to my clients, right? Audiobooks on tape. And there was a book called Y Combinator Launchpad, and they were giving out money for ideas. It talks about Airbnb and that first cohort of founders from Y Combinator. I go, wow, that seems a lot more fun than what I'm doing here. Let's go do that. So anyways, moved back to Silicon Valley with the goal of working at a Y Combinator funded company. And I did that. And with that, I spent the last decade here working for a variety of different tech startups and really helping high growth, high tech companies scale from that 0 to 1, early traction to global community. And really focusing on that. And so I've been doing AI stuff in that space since like 2018, before ChatGPT came out to everyone. And with that, I saw how powerful it was. I was actually in this spot where we were explaining what the heck is machine learning to people back in 2018. That was really hard. We were doing machine learning and data science to bid on search engine ads. And being able to figure out what that was, synthesize that information, and explain it to our customers was a huge learning point for me. And I could just see like the light bulb go off when people got how powerful this technology was.
Yeah, the first board that I sat on, Jenny, was an AI-powered company in 2019, and it was very novel at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And we've come so far since then. And it's really cool to see this technology in the hands of so many people now.
Silicon Valley, come from a family of technologists and visit my sister who had been at some point in Intel for a couple of decades. And, standing in line at Starbucks is much like the Star Wars bar scene, right? The conversations that you hear back and forth, and you can just sit there and be carried with the stream of conversation. So, it's fascinating. Your paths will really reflect how cyber and AI aren't siloed anymore, right? They sit at the heart of business leadership. And let's talk about what that means for boards and policy. So Tamara, I'd like to start with you.
Sure.
You spend a lot of time in boardrooms and helping leaders navigate risk, transformation. How prepared do you think boards really are to oversee cybersecurity and AI risk today?
Not very. I think most boards define preparedness in terms of how much of the facts they know and understand. And I think AI is moving so fast, it is impossible to be at that level where board leaders feel like they're comfortable with what they know now. Like the world is moving too fast. And I think that's really one of the challenges that boards as a whole face, is that the pace of AI change in the business is totally out of sync with the rate of board dynamics. And so how you adapt your board to a smaller standing committee or a smaller team that's combined with management, that's consistent with your bylaws but has power to act so that you can move at the pace the business needs to move, is one of the greatest challenges we're seeing in the boardroom right now.
And there are two things we're seeing that you talked about. One is the speed at which things are moving, and we do have a lot of students who are getting into cybersecurity on listening to this podcast. So we've got students, we've got CISOs and CTOs listening in, and then all three of us have PDA in common, the Private Directors Association. So hopefully there are potential board members that are going to listen to this conversation as well, right? And we're being carried forward. For the students, often their job has not been discovered yet, right, or defined yet as they go through school. For boards, we don't know the technology we're preparing for. You said very well that we're moving so fast. What can directors do to become more, and I use the term cyber literate loosely because we've got 3 or 4 legs to this stool. There's cybersecurity, there's cyber as a whole, there's AI. And ladies, coming soon to a corner near you is the whole quantum computing piece. Google has just announced the Echoes piece with Willow and has just put a stake in the ground saying 2 years from now, we're going to be talking about quantum computing in a commercial use. One of our guests that we had earlier that's actively involved in the testing, that quantum computing, and he put this dramatically, could erase encryption, right? That's the amount of computing power that's available to us. So we could crack any encryption keys in seconds, if not minutes, right? And so how do directors specifically become more literate and proactive in their oversight tenure?
So I think what you saw in cybersecurity is that there weren't a lot of board members who actually had in-depth cybersecurity experience, For public boards, you saw at least one person on the board who had relevant experience, maybe another one or two who were sort of fluent in the language, even though they didn't do that work as their day-to-day job. And so you really relied on simulations in the boardroom to prepare yourself for how you would react. What is very different about AI is that there are real tools that you can use in how you do your job as a board member and how you do your day job and how you run your household or plan your next family vacation or, edit your family Christmas photo. There are hands-on tools that you can use to build your skill set and your familiarity with the tools in a way that makes you just more in touch with the day-to-day issues. And while those are very different than some of the in-depth AI conversations you're going to be having in your boardroom, it is still much more accessible to the average board member. And so whatever sparks your curiosity, whether it's getting in and playing with Perplexity's new AI finance tool, or fiddling around with like your next post on LinkedIn, like go out and try it and use it and get used to, like the failure rate, what it's projecting back to you in your field of expertise. Is it accurate? Does it have valid citations? But go out and play with it so that you can infer the limitations of AI in the setting of the corporation you're sitting on the board.
I believe every leader needs a baseline of AI fluency. Whether you're in the boardroom or not, AI is something, like Tamara said, that is accessible to most people. If you've got an internet connection, go check it out. And when you're in there playing with it, whatever that looks like for you, and trying out new tools and testing out new ways to use it, it'll help you understand it better and then help you ask better questions at the board level. And if you're not sure what those board level questions are, we do have a framework that we've just authored that I'm sure we'll be talking a bit about today that's designed to help you with those questions.
Excellent. Thank you. And that really helps. And I'm sure, just being part of the environment, being in conversation with fellow board members, there's just the swell lifts you up and kind of forces you, so to speak, to get involved and become aware. So, Tamara, I had to ask this question, fair warning, that you've been a big advocate for cognitive diversity on boards, right? Not, and you are. How does diversity of thought strengthen cyber resilience and decision making?
If we can talk about just cognitive diversity more broadly for a moment, imagine that you're a tech company here in the Valley or anywhere else, and everyone on your board is from your university, studied the same subject, read the same books, looked at the same frameworks. When you are faced with a challenge as a company, you are going to use the same lenses to approach that data set.
So
And
true.
so you're not getting a lot of value from the board if you have 4 people, 5 people, 8 people, 12 people looking at the same data in the same way. So the goal of the CEO is to build a board that can help see the blind spots that they have. And we all have them. And humility is not strong among tech CEOs, but we need to identify what our blind spots are and hire people who have a different perspective. So is that an ethicist? Is it a mathematician? Is it an HR person? Is it someone much older or much younger than we are? Is it someone who's been a veteran or who's worked abroad? Someone from a different faith tradition, a different gender? All of these layers that make us who we are help us see things in a different way. And so when we're facing really difficult challenges, we want to approach it from all angles possible. And so you want a board that is very multifaceted. And so I think when we see it in cybersecurity or in AI, it's not sufficient to have one expert on your board. You may have one point person who's an expert who does, those technology tasks as their primary job, but you need 2 or 3 other people who have strong background knowledge and perspective who can challenge the status quo. or you're going to miss opportunities or obstacles in your company's path?
Um, well stated, well summarized. The movie Stepford Wives came to mind the moment you started saying, hey, you know what, if we had board members doing exactly the same thing. Um, being the CEO of a cyber company, well, we didn't, we started with IT and evolved into cybersecurity over 30 years before I sold Aurora. Um, Humility, that was a sore topic. I mean, it's so true, right? Humility and transparency, ladies. You get this. This is just natural, but you're right. For CEOs, somehow, I had to work hard. And then as I look back 33 years later, I wondered what the heck the big fuss was about, right? It's you got to be transparent. There's no reason not to. And humility, just opening up and building that foundation of trust. Both humility and transparency go a long way there. A couple of more follow-up questions for you, Tamara, before I head to you, Jenny. And Jenny, feel free to dive in. This is a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. So, just really quick, 5-10 seconds. Any real life example about how diversity of thought, helps in decision making that you've actually seen in boards that you're part of?
I will say that the data says having a diverse boardroom means that your company makes more money, full stop, with no qualifications. You recall products faster, you have fewer lawsuits, you have better benefits. It's just frankly
Okay.
good business.
The sky is blue and this works. Okay, got it. Perfect. From a policy standpoint, Tamara, here's your specialty, right? Organizations often focus on compliance and will trade TLAs or three-letter acronyms for four-letter, right? GDPR in Europe, privacy. California leads with CCPA, followed by New York and a few others. And then, of course, there's the administrations and NIST frameworks, right? Um, so, from a policy standpoint, while they focus on compliance, these are not necessarily proactive resilience. What does a forward-looking cyber governance model look like to you?
Um, I'm going to hold that question for a minute. I think the biggest policy question that we are facing as a society is, will we let the gains, the efficiency gains from AI, accrue to a few people who have built the best AI models or who have first mover advantage in the AI space? Or will we share that wealth amongst all tiers of society? And I think that will largely reflect whether we continue to have a middle class as a society, or we move further into something that looks more like an oligarchic or aristocratic model. And I think that it is very difficult to keep that societal picture in mind without government intervention. I don't think companies will police themselves to share their gains with workers without active, coordinated movement from
Sure,
masses.
sure. I agree. Wall Street is that primary driver.
So I think that is the most important structural decision that we have to make, and we have a short time window to make that decision before the train has sort of left the station.
So under the umbrella, coming to my question, like there are things happening, right? And we talked about this. Um, Not too long ago was encryption. Now, and I'm skipping forward a whole bunch of things.
Mhm.
Today we are at the confluence of AI that's absolutely data hungry and needs as much data as possible. Europe started putting pressure on privacy. Today, so is the United States. We still have 50 states with 50 different privacy laws. But California led with CPRA and now CCPA.
Mhm.
New York is following. Texas is coming on board. NIST has a AI risk mitigation framework. I generally feel, or allow me to say no, that these are more reactive in nature, right? And so we are setting cybersecurity policy that's not resilient. We kind of know the factors within which threat actors operate, but these governance models, in my opinion, are not forward-looking. Any thoughts on putting in policy that's more forward-looking as we ask boards to kind of bone up on AI and technology and everything else?
So I think you've got a couple of different tensions. One, I think companies that from the management team are saying that if they don't do something with AI, they're going to simply cease to exist. And they're running into tension with their boards who want to quantify the risk and make a slow and deliberate decision. And the CEOs are saying that the company won't exist if we move at your pace. And so there's that tension. And then you have the tension on, are we doing the right thing? Do we have permission to use the underlying data set? You know, if you look at all of these large language models that were built on other people's copyrighted works, and they've basically just plunged ahead and are hoping to ask forgiveness later, or for the problem to be so insurmountable that, you know, they'll never get levied the fine of paying for those copyrighted works because it would essentially put them out of business. Um, so you've got all of these pressures moving to just move fast. And there is no legislative framework in the world that is moving at the pace of AI change. So I think from a corporate perspective, you are looking to make take the action that is in the best interest of your business. And there you're having to work with your legal team and your accounting team to quantify what that potential exposure might be if at some point retroactively somebody decides that you have misstepped. And then you're getting into very sophisticated risk and option modeling. And, you know, that might be a good reason to have someone with a strong risk management or mathematical background on your board.
Thank you.
And I
And any, yes, I see you nodding vehemently.
I wanted to bring up that MIT report that just came out, the 95% of generative AI pilot projects that are actually failing to show a measurable return. And the reason I think it's important to bring up is because, like Tamara was talking, there's that tension that's happening in a few different places. And when we say, hey, let's just do AI to do AI, you're not going to see the result. You need to have the why behind it, and you need to have the data to back it up. You need to have the data to feed the model, like you were talking about, Philip. We're data hungry. And if your business has not been capturing data correctly, you're going to struggle to have success using AI until you get that fixed. So there's a lot of concerns to look at as we're racing ahead. And it might not be the silver bullet we all think it is. If we can just slow down and get the data right and ask the right questions, I think we can put boards and companies in a stronger position.
If we want to get specific for just a second, Philip, we actually met you at a conference last month where Jenny and I presented a framework for AI board governance to tackle these questions with some sort of structure in the boardroom because the questions are so immense. It's called our AI Governance Compass. It's available at Women X AI. Any of your members or listeners can feel free to download it and access it. Essentially, there's 4 key points. Thank you, Jenny. Just sort of 4 quadrants to look at when you look at board governance. One is, as an individual board director, you can't participate in these conversations if you're only reading about AI and you're not using it. And you need to use it in things you've never done before, and you need to use it in areas where you have deep subject matter expertise and can vouch for the quality of the output. You also need to look at it as a board. Do you use AI in your boardroom? How is your board set up structurally to deal with AI issues? How do you deal with some subset of your board making more timely decisions in partnership with management? And just what is your overall risk framework? And, you know, where should you be focused on your attention? Obviously, there's a lot of information out there for organizations and how they should look to AI in terms of what's permitted and not permitted and, you know, who has access to their data. So there's a whole section of the compass to focus on that. And then the last is stakeholders. So we work mostly in the private company space, but in the public company space, this would also include shareholders. But this is, your community at large, your employees, your customers, your suppliers, competitors in the space. How are you all working in concert to adopt AI in a way that's, going to leave the world better off? And so the goal with the compass was that you could see the scope of the issue so that you had a sense of the scope of the issue facing the board, but also there's a scoring mechanism so that you can prioritize 2 or 3 items to work on at a time, because we all know if you have 15 priorities, you don't have any.
That session was well designed, very well thought out, and there wasn't enough time. There was so much of information. People wanted to just hang on and needed more at the end. I was part of that session, much like I'm thinking I should ask you for another couple of hours to do this podcast, right? But I promise you one thing: we will put links to the compass, the white paper, in our show notes. And um, Jenny, do you want to comment on what you're sharing?
Sure, this is the scoring sheet that Tamara was talking about. And our thought with this was that, if you have 16 priorities, nothing really is. And how do you decide where to start? Because there's so many pieces to what's out there. And so what we did is we actually went through each piece of the framework. We spent a ton of time with our co-authors, Joanna Ridgway and Paula Fontana and Ray Lazo, coming up with how do you ask the question in relation to that piece of the compass. And then if it's in good shape, you give it a 1. If you need to do some work, you'll give it a higher number. And then there's a little multiplier in the next column. So it can be, is it important to your core business or the ecosystem, or both? And then it will color accordingly. And then you can pick the ones that are the highest numbers or the most red to focus on. Typically 3 to 4 priorities, what we recommend.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing that. Again, for those of you that actually want links, you will find it in our show notes when we publish. So that's a great bridge to the next topic. Because AI is changing the risk landscape faster than most policy frameworks can keep up. Jenny, your work in AI puts you right at the innovation forefront. Right? From your perspective, what are the biggest cybersecurity risks emerging from how companies are using AI today? Red, yellow, speaking to your scoring sheet.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'm tracking. The privacy and cybersecurity areas are kind of merging with AI ethics, right? How should we be using this technology? And, just because it's a lot easier for us to do things, that means it's a lot easier for everyone, right? A little bit of YouTube, a little bit of Chat GPT, and all of a sudden, those hackers that, were mid-range are now really, really good. And so there is that concern as well. I think it's one of the things that is interesting about this is that as we get more technology, we're also going to have more risk in terms of cybersecurity. The other thing that I'm tracking is that AI governance at the board level is really becoming a board skill, and not just for one person on the board, like we were talking about earlier. It's something that all board members should be paying attention to because it's going to impact whatever their area of expertise is. And lastly, transparency. I know we've been talking about that a bit today, Philip, but I think there's a new way of working at transparency, a new expectation that our customers have. Was this coded with AI? Is this a real person in the photo? Is it made by, Gemini Nano Banana? Or, what is it that I'm interacting with on social, on media these days? And so it's really important. And that's one of the things we do at Women X AI is we always try and say, hey, this was made in collaboration with AI, and this is the tool we used.
So, well said. Earlier, to your point, we'd bring in the subject matter expert, right? If it was some biotech complicated issue. And the same thing happened with security in its early days. It was treated as a capital item. in your balance sheet, right? People are like, oh yeah, we've got to be security ready. Today, the same cybersecurity is just a line item below coffee and stationery, right?
Oh,
And three things happening in boards. No longer do we have the seat reserved for the AI subject matter expert. We've gone rapidly to saying, look, all of you have to ramp up and be subject matter experts. Interesting conversation. Jenny, thank you for bringing that up, and you heard it on this podcast first. So, are certain industries um, more exposed than others?
yes. So when you look at what is your appetite for risk, Tamara mentioned earlier looking at the failure rate. And, if you're a CPG company, you might be a little bit more flexible. If you are a health tech company or a fintech company, you don't have much room for error. You can't get these things wrong. And so that means the way that you use AI, the way that you deploy AI, the way that you allow your company, your team to use AI is different. So it depends what type of environment you're operating in and how much appetite you have for risk. And the more risk you can have, the more you can leverage AI. But either way, you're going to want guardrails in place. You're going to want a human in the loop. You're going to want to be able to understand what's going on and also avoid that bring your own AI that's happening for employees out there. A lot of companies are seeing this, and it's something I'm tracking. If you don't have an AI policy in place, people are going to just naturally start using the AI they have access to. And that may not be an enterprise version, and that may result in your data being out there when you don't want it to be.
So true. You've said, right, to point to this role just stimulated a question for me. Within organizations using AI versus the bad guy using that same information. You've said AI can be used for both the defender and the attacker. Could you give an example of what that looks like in practice? I mean, you just alluded to it, and how organizations can prepare for that dual edge.
So I think that when you're doing this, we all have access to AI. So we're all able to level up, whether it is, the team that's doing stuff for good or the team that's doing stuff for nefarious reasons. And I think that it kind of goes to this help or hindrance thing. Is AI good for us or bad for us? And I don't believe that it either. It just amplifies what's going on in our society. It can amplify who we are as a society. And I believe we should use it to make things better, that we should really elevate the human creativity, elevate our decision making, elevate our leadership. Not so much using it for the negative, but that's what we as a community get to pick. And since it's early in the age of AI, we all get to have a say. If we wait too long, though, we're going to see some of the mistakes that we made before, in the internet era or the social media era repeated. And I think that's why that cognitive diversity that Tamara talks about is so important. We need to have different voices in the room.
One last question for you, specifically on AI and innovation. And again, you've talked about this, so this may appear like a softball question, but it isn't. Many startups are racing to deploy AI without guardrails. Like, hey, can I just use it, right? What are the most common, governance mistakes you see when businesses integrate AI into their operations?
So not having the underlying data that you need to be successful, not having the why. And I believe that's a lot of why that MIT study had such a high failure rate for pilots, is because the objective can't just be to use AI. It has to be to meet this particular business goal. And then, is AI the right way to do that? Or how can AI help us do that? If you're using AI just for the sake of using AI because you feel pressure because your competitor is, you're not going to have good results. So those are some mistakes I see happening a lot. And then also not upskilling your employees. I mean, you look at things like Duolingo's mistake. They let a bunch of people go. They turned it over to the AI, and there was a huge, huge public backlash. People were losing those amazing, super high count Duolingo streaks that they had going over this. And I think that that goes back to the society piece. You have to be talking to your customers, to your users, to all of your stakeholders to see if the way you're hoping to use AI lines up with their values. When it's not aligned with your values, you're going to run into issues like that.
And I think we're allowing for a learning curve. I think we're expecting to put in some subset of information in AI and to get a perfect result back because the computer doesn't need to learn. But like any other tool, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And everyone using AI is going to make mistakes in how they ask the question, how they structure the data. And so you have to build in time to fail into your timeline, whether it's for a specific task or a project or an overall implementation. And we're not seeing people really build in like a reasonable amount of failure time. And they're taking an initial mistake and treating it as a universal failure when it's just a necessary step on the road to adoption.
True. And one of my questions to you, Tamara, you had opened with the fact that, look, CEOs, CISOs, CTOs will often come and say, look, if we don't implement AI, we're dead, right? That comment was brilliant because it recognizes that, look, while we're on a board, we actually have a company to run. That's most important, right? And Jenny, you looked at it a different way and you said, look, you know what? We've got to ensure that AI is implemented for the betterment of the organization. Between both of you, Tamara, you've said that, look, there's got to be a sense of equality. We've got to take off the high end, the highly economic successful, and the low end, and even it out. And Jenny, you talked about the guardrails and the foresight that we need to AI implementation. So I'm convinced that between the two of you, we can save the world. Let's move on, right? So both of you talk about leadership and culture, and that's where cyber and AI and policy intersect. Let's explore that connection a little, right? So Tamara, culture change is a huge challenge in cybersecurity. You specialize in leading organizations through transformation. How do leaders make cybersecurity part of their culture instead of just a checklist item?
I think oftentimes we forget the human element. People are naturally resistant to change. And I think we forget that when we draw a path of where we are to where we're going, not everybody is starting in the same place. And so either the map is too detailed because it's right in my backyard and you're giving me too much information, or it's so top level, fly to London and then show up at the store. Well, I've never been to London and I need more information. So we're not scaling the map to the level of detail that different levels in the organization need. And there is uncertainty about, am I still going to have a job? Do I have the skills to do my job well? I just got married and just had a baby, and the world seems like it's ending because the news is horrible every night. And now you want me to totally change the way I do my job. I can't take any more change. And so I think bringing some compassion and safety to the exercise is just sort of critical to manage the human element because we want to keep our people. It's not that AI has to displace your workforce. It's going to give them a new tool to do their job to help them achieve more, in a shorter amount of time. But the goal is not to leave everyone unemployed, but we've still got to be thoughtful and compassionate in how we get people from where we are to where we're going.
Just when I thought humility and transparency is enough, what? Now we've got compassion and thought. No, ladies, I jest, but seriously, this is very valuable conversation. Jenny, through Women XAR, right? You emphasize inclusion and ethics. Now, how does diversity influence not only fairer AI but also more secure AI? Matter closer to my heart.
So when you think about the AI that we use, it's trained on data. And in that data, there's biases that are reflected by our society. So if I type into an image generator, you'll say, hey, I'd like a picture of a tech CEO on stage. It's not going to send back someone who looks like me. It's going to be a man. And even when I say give me a female CEO, sometimes it still gives you a man. Very frustrating. But it's about showing the people in the room to say, hey, I'm having this problem, and actually letting the foundation models know and logging a ticket. So I encourage all of you, if you're seeing issues like this showing up in the models you're using, let them know. I know some people who work on these models, and they do actually want to know. They want your feedback, and they're working to make it better. So I think that is super important. When we look at security, it's a very similar thing. When you're noticing an issue, you should raise your hand and let people know about it. And that goes for internally and externally as well. So when you're having who should be at the room deciding our company's AI policy, I want that table to be very different. I want many voices in that room so we can make sure we're thinking of all the things and including that in the policy.
So, great conversation. And just to remind all of us, we're at the intersection of policy and culture, and we're talking leadership. So my question for both of you to close this segment is there enough representation and leadership to address these issues meaningfully yet?
We have room to do better.
Jenny?
I'd have to echo the same thing. I mean, there are people out there. There are different voices available, but they don't always get handed the microphone. They don't always get the press coverage. They don't always get the spotlight. And I think that's the first place to start, because then you'll make it more welcoming and more people will want to come in. So I'm really a big fan of elevating the voices we do have, but also making the environment more inclusive. So we'll bring in more new voices, because it's not equal, not yet.
Okay. So I'll give you about 30 seconds while I speak to think about this one. So Jenny, this is coming to you from an innovation AI ethics perspective. Tamara, same question for you from a board oversight perspective, right? And this is to deal with AI policy today. So both of you have talked about that. If you could redesign one piece of cyber or AI policy today, what would you prioritize first? Whoever's ready.
This is a good question. So I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from the way we've done things before. And after a decade in Silicon Valley, I have seen it's always, can we do this? Not should we do this? And so I'd like to just switch the lens through which we're looking at things. Not, is this technically possible, but is this the right choice? Should we be doing this? And that can be at the policy level, that can be at the board level, at the C-suite, but that is a really important flip in how we're thinking about things.
I love it. And the more technology advances and the more human-like technology becomes, that's the eternal quest. That question of should we be doing it just gains more weight. Well said. Tim?
I think maybe just to narrow the focus on Jenny's answer, once we can do it, we will do it. We're just not known for restraint. So I guess maybe I'm not quite as optimistic there, Jenny. It is, how do we do it in a way that creates the most good for the most people? So when we create the gains from new technology, which is, the end result of, the decades of innovation here in Silicon Valley, how do we make sure that those gains accrue to the most possible people? We really need to stop it from accruing just at the top.
This you alluded to earlier, to a larger or just completely inclusive ecosystem.
Yeah, I think a good example of this is we're looking at this and it's like the AI race and everyone's in it. But the culture here in Silicon Valley is the 996. So that's not necessarily the right way. What if we were looking at AI as a way to get us to that 4-day work week instead? So I think there's a lot of layers we'll be seeing this in terms of, full-time work and what does that mean in terms of compensation and the way that we're able to do this. And Tamara, just to circle back, I do think that legislation might be required to get people to get that lens flip. happening.
True,
Well,
true,
for
true.
the, sorry, Tamara.
No, and I mean, true enough. I do think legislation will be required, but I think we've got several years of seeing it in action before legislation catches up. Pace of AI knowledge here and the pace of AI knowledge in DC are just, they're worlds apart.
I haven't met a group of people yet who would fight a 4-day work week. Explain the 996 for our listeners, please, Jenny.
So it's working from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. So instead of, your 40-hour work week, you're looking at a lot more. And I think that might be the wrong direction. We're going to be seeing burnout. We're going to see mistakes made in code. We're going to see mistakes made in leadership. I do think it'll end up catching up with us, but time will tell.
And it
No,
also
you're-
creates a society where that person has no contributions outside of their corporate role. You're not raising a family. You're not contributing to a household's functioning. You're not participating in the caretaking of your community or your parents. And so you're shifting all of that burden on someone else. So your company might be doing great because you're working 72 hours a week. They're almost getting 2 for 1 in their employees. But the slack is picked up by others. So it's
Absolutely.
cost on society somehow, some way, somewhere. And I think what we're looking for is we can do all these cool new tech things, but we need to achieve them with balance.
So you are mandating 8 hours of sleep through legislation. I love it.
That's one way to do it. Yes.
Yep. So while we could go on forever, let's wrap with a look forward, right? The future of cyber governance and the role each of us has to play. And this is kind of sort of rapid fire, but I don't think it is. So if both of you were advising national policymakers, say the White House, Cybersecurity Policy Office, what's one urgent recommendation you would make about AI and cybersecurity regulation today?
I would say that we need to be, looking at what other countries are doing, what other states are doing, and not only matching that, but probably going a step further. We should be leading in that area, in my opinion.
Okay. And Tamara, before you answer, I'm going to challenge you a little bit, right? So you said equality in technology and everything else. Now, I'm being a little facetious, but allow me. Let's say we push this equality and we give China the NVIDIA chips that they so desperately want, and they use the same technology that we've created against us.
Oh, that just went in a bunch of different directions.
It did. So the question still is, right?
So to start, I don't have an issue from a national security perspective of there being rules on the export of certain technology to people who we view as geopolitical competitors. I don't think that fundamentally I have a problem with that. I may have a question about the experts in charge of making those decisions, but that's a topic for another day. I think there's real reasons to be concerned about that. In terms of, I don't know that I'm advocating for equality. I think we just want some balance. I don't think anyone envisions a society where everybody is, exactly the same. I think that gets back to our whole discussion about cognitive diversity. I think we're just looking to narrow the range a little bit, and still enjoy the diverse society that we live in. From a policy perspective, I think we need a framework that can be more nimble, to adapt to the pace of change that doesn't have to go through the legislative process that at this moment has become very partisan and slow and difficult to navigate. So if we could get to the place where there was a framework in place where we had an advisory board that was nonpartisan that could make decisions at a more rapid rate, I think that's what the situation calls for. And I think we need to get back to the human element. And there is a place, even in a fully AI-enabled world, for human-created art, whether that's literature or painting or design or actors. And I think we have to find a way to protect that art and to foster its creation in a way that is sustainable and can live and breathe alongside AI creations. And I think that will be a real testament to sort of human creativity and our ability to continue fostering that innovation in the arts.
Your very adept substitution of the word balance for equality is the reason why I constantly surround myself by people smarter than me. For our listeners, whether they're CISOs, entrepreneurs, board members, or students, as I was mentioning earlier, what's one thing that they can do this quarter to strengthen their organizational cybersecurity or AI governance posture? Something practical, actionable, or takeaway. Definitely going to share the compass in our publishing of this podcast.
I think pick 3 tools, and whether you listen to a YouTube video about it or follow your favorite creator, but Perplexity just released a great finance module that helps you actually create spreadsheets with AI. 3 tools that you would otherwise use in your real life. Use AI to create a LinkedIn post. Use it to fix your, family holiday photo. Plan a family vacation find 3 real world applications to use it and just get your hands wet. Like, being afraid to use it is going to spell the end of your career as you know it. There's no time like the present. Like, you've got to roll up your sleeves and just try something. And please give yourself grace. You're going to fail the first couple times. It's going to be funny. It's going to make you laugh. It's not going to be what you want. And that's part of the journey.
To echo what Tamara said, I often talk about going from AI curious to AI empowered. And when I'm talking about that, I recommend one simple thing that people can do. Block 15 minutes once a week in your calendar to try out a new AI tool. And it doesn't seem like that much, but 15 minutes will get you pretty far. And a lot of the times you'll find you're having fun, so you'll come back to it later. The other thing that I would say is find a community, because learning AI by yourself at this fast, rapid pace is so hard. No one can keep up. And so when you're able to learn AI in community, you're able to get recommendations. I use the tool like this. I use the tool like that. So we have that over at Women X AI. We love our allies, so everyone is welcome to come join us. And we just released 39 battle-tested AI tools by our AI Titans Tools Council that we can include in the show notes.
Awesome. Well done. And finally, looking let's say 5 years ahead, okay? What's your biggest hope and your biggest fear about where AI and cybersecurity are headed?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Sure. I mean, my biggest hope is that we are choosing to use AI for good and that we are able to move closer to that 4-day work week, that we are able to live our values and use AI as a way to get there. I see it as a great potential equalizer if we decide to do that. We can also decide to go the other way, which then leads into the fear side. And Philip, when you're talking about quantum, that is scary, especially at the board level. How do you protect yourself from something that powerful that also isn't available yet, so that you have no way to do the defense quite yet? And for me, I think it's all about learning and staying up to date with these technological advancements. But the fear is that, maybe we don't, or maybe we get focused on something else. And so continuous learning, I think, is the antidote to that. But, falling behind in the technology age is a real concern for many of us.
If I'm projecting out my wish list, we've got a group of companies that are on the forefront of the business pages and at the top of the stock market, whose leadership looks like the diversity of America. We've got more women, certainly, in leadership. We have a more robust middle class that feels empowered and skilled to use these tools and have a rewarding private life. If we could use AI to reduce some of the bias in systems, particularly in the venture capital space, where I think this year we're looking at less than 1% of venture capital funding is going to women. We have the power do remarkable generational historical change with AI. So, like Jenny said, I hope we're going to use the tool to create good.
Well stated, both of you. We will include everything that we talked about or referred to in our show notes, including with your approval, your LinkedIn, should people want to reach out
Absolutely.
for
Of course.
information. Thank you. And anything that I may have missed.
No, this has been fascinating, Philip. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you, Philip. This was a lot of fun.
Truly, ladies, it was. I thought we'll be done in 30 minutes and we're tracking 60 at the moment, maybe 45 after edits, but I enjoyed every minute. And Tamara Gracon and Jenny Kay Pollock, thank you both for such a rich, forward-looking discussion. You reminded us that cybersecurity isn't just a tech problem. It's a leadership, policy, and cultural imperative. And that AI, for all its promise, will demand new kinds of governance and collaboration. For our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow Secur IT wherever you get your podcasts. You can learn more about Tamara's governance work at TBG Consulting and about Jenny's involvement in community at Women X AI. I am Philip de Souza. Stay smart, stay secure, and we'll see you on the next Secur IT.